problems that I can elaborate on, just let me know. All right, the last one is just kind of this inverse trig. And this one is kind of like tricky, or at least just the student was asking like to understand inverse trigonometry. So let's just kind of think about the cosine graph. So if you're to do the cosine graph, now again, remember this graph goes on and on forever, right? It's never going to stop. Now, the inverse of a function is reflect about the y equals x line. Well, the problem is if you were to reflect the cosine graph about the y equals x line, then you'd have a graph that looks like this. Or sorry, looks like that. There you go. Right? You'd have a graph that looks like that, which is not going to work because that's not going to pass the vertical line test, right? Because if this is going to be f of x equals cosine of x, and this is the g of x, which equals cosine inverse of x, this is called the inverse function. It needs to be a function. This is not a function. So then what we do is we were going to restrict the graph. Now, how should we restrict the graph? Well, we got to restrict it between an interval that will pass the vertical line test. So the interval that we choose here is between these two lines, okay? And then what we do is we just eliminate the rest of this. Now, I'm going to leave that up there just because I want you guys to see like where it came from. Okay, so it's still like there, but now we're only looking at that restriction between those two values. Now, a lot of students say, well, you know, what is that distance here from here to there? And basically we're taking this restriction of the domain for cosine of x, and that is what we're looking at for the reflection here. Well, if you look at, you know, from here to here is from 0 to 2 pi. So then this distance from here to here is going to be from 0 to pi. So that's why when we're doing restrictions for cosine inverse, we're only looking for the angles between 0 and pi on the unit circle. So hopefully that helps. It's not a very in-depth explanation,